It's funny. Just a few months back, like late last year, it felt like everywhere you turned, everyone was talking about those weird drone sightings over New Jersey. I
Yeah.
mean, the news just couldn't get enough of it, right? Social
Oh,
media was all abuzz. Even politicians were getting in on the action, making headlines with all sorts of theories.
right.
But then, like almost overnight, it all just sort of, I don't know, vanished.
It really did. Like, it just disappeared. The speed at which that whole story, like, captivated everyone, grabbed the public's attention and then just kind of faded away.
Totally.
It's pretty remarkable.
It's like it never even happened.
Yeah.
And that's actually what we're going to be deep diving into today. We're gonna try to unpack how this whole drone frenzy, first took hold, how it grabbed everyone's attention, and then seemingly just evaporated into thin air,
Right.
kind of like those supposed drones themselves.
Yeah.
So let's rewind a bit. Let's go back to late 2024. You remember New Jersey was suddenly just inundated with all these reports of these strange drones in
Yeah.
the sky
Yeah, and they were popping up all over the place.
everywhere.
I mean, even near Trump's club in Bedminster.
Oh, yeah.
Which, just added like another layer of intrigue and speculation to the whole
Oh,
thing.
absolutely. It was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
The FBI even got involved. The FAA even went so far as to issue temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs, over certain areas.
Wow.
And of course, like everyone was trying to figure out, where these drones were coming from, what they were doing, like what's the purpose of this whole thing.
It did feel like something straight out of like a movie or something. Like all this mystery and intrigue, but when you look back at it, there's a pretty glaring problem with the whole narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about the lack of hard evidence.
Exactly. For all the hype, all the concern, all the fear, nobody ever actually managed to produce like a clear picture,
Yeah.
a clear video of these supposed mystery drones. Most of the evidence that was floating around online, it was all just grainy footage,
Right.
blurry, shaky images of, lights in the sky.
And that's where things get really interesting,
Mm-hmm.
because that lack of clear evidence, that didn't deter the media from running with the story.
Yeah.
In fact, it almost felt like it fueled the frenzy.
It's true. News outlets, they were relying on eyewitness accounts. And, those are notoriously unreliable.
Of course, yeah.
Especially when you're talking about something as, visually ambiguous as just as lights in the sky at night. I mean, how do you know?
Right, yeah. And some of those eyewitness accounts were pretty out there. I remember reading about people who were claiming to have seen formations of drones.
Oh, wow.
Even a giant mothership hovering in the clouds.
It's amazing what people think they see.
I know, right?
It's a classic case of our brains, trying to fill in the blanks when we're given like incomplete or ambiguous information. And in this case, it just seems like everyone was just primed.
Right.
Primed to see drones everywhere they looked.
Yeah, especially with drones being, such a hot topic in the news and on social media. It was almost like this idea of a drone invasion became like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Totally. Yeah. And we can't forget about the role of certain politicians in all this who shall we say, kind of leaned into the speculation. They, made some pretty outlandish claims about Iranian drones and other sort of, far-fetched theories.
Yeah. Congressman Van Drew, he was all over the news with his pronouncements about the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. And those kinds of statements coming from, figures of authority, it legitimizes the anxiety,
Of course, yeah.
the fears that were already circulating.
Yeah. So you've got this perfect storm brewing. You've got ambiguous evidence. You've got media hype. You've got political grandstanding. It's all feeding into this growing sense of unease, this feeling like something's not quite right.
Exactly. And then enter Mick West.
Oh, wow. Yes. The ultimate drone debunker.
The myth buster.
This guy, he's a science writer who's known for, taking on these conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Decided to apply his analytical skills to the New Jersey drone mystery. And he did not hold back.
No, he did not.
He meticulously went through all the available footage.
And what he found was, it was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it was amazing. He basically demonstrated that a lot of these so-called drone sightings were actually just airplanes.
Yeah.
Helicopters, even stars and planets.
It's incredible how easily we can be fooled,
I know.
especially when we're already sort of predisposed to believing something. Like, you want to see something, you're going to see it.
I remember there was one particular case that he debunked. There was this reporter, Lucy Biggers. I think she was working for one of the local news channels.
Okay.
She captured this footage of what she thought were drones at a train station. It turned out to be a small plane.
Wow.
Perfectly explainable.
Yeah, it's a good example of how even, people in positions of authority, reporters, they can be susceptible to these misperceptions,
Yeah.
especially when they're, caught up in the heat of a breaking news story. Got to get the scoop.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just reporters. If you remember, even Trump initially expressed concern about these drones.
He did, yeah. But then he kind of backtracked.
Yeah, and that shift in his stance coincided with a White House statement that came out in January of 2025, which basically attributed the sightings to authorized research, hobbyists, private individuals, just normal drone activity. Nothing to see here, folks.
Right, right. And that statement coming from, the White House, it seemed to really have an impact on the narrative.
Yeah, and the timing of it was really interesting. It came right as media interest in the story was already beginning to kind of fade.
It did. It makes you wonder, if maybe it was a calculated move to quell the panic, to try and sweep the whole thing under the rug.
Yeah. I mean, it does raise the question, did the FAA or maybe some other authorities, did they intentionally downplay the issue to try and calm the public? Or was it just a coincidence that their statement lined up with, that waning media interest?
It's a question that still hasn't really been answered.
Yeah.
And we may never know the full story, but what's undeniable is that the drone hysteria, it effectively vanished from the public consciousness not long after that statement.
Yeah. Just like that. One day it's the biggest story in the country. The next day it's barely a whisper. And that rapid decline, that sudden disappearance from the headlines, that's what really makes this whole episode so fascinating.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, what happened to all that fear and uncertainty? People were genuinely worried. Like, some people were even scared.
Right.
There were, people calling for investigations, demands for answers.
Yeah.
It was a real, palpable sense of unease.
Totally.
And then poof, it's gone.
It's almost like we as a society, we have this collective short-term memory.
Yeah.
We latch onto these sensational stories. We obsess over them for a little bit.
Right.
And then just as quickly, we kind of move on to the next big thing, whatever that might be.
Yeah, it's true. And it's it's especially true now.
Right.
In the age of the 24-hour news cycle and social media. We're just constantly bombarded with information.
Right.
It can be overwhelming just trying to keep up with it all.
Yeah.
I feel like our attention spans are shrinking and we're just constantly chasing, that next dopamine hit of a breaking news alert, something new, something shiny.
Yeah, I know. I'm definitely I'm guilty of that myself sometimes. But in this case, I don't think it's just our shrinking attention spans at play here.
Right.
I think there's something about the way this this drone story was framed.
Yeah.
The lack of any concrete answers. It almost like it invited this kind of rapid rise and fall in public interest.
Right. It was like the mystery surrounding it.
Right.
These drones. It was a huge factor in why they were so captivating.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that same ambiguity also made it that much easier for the story to just disappear.
Yeah, because without any definitive answers,
Yeah.
without a clear resolution, people could just kind of shrug their shoulders and move on. The mystery's still there.
Right.
But the urgency, the need to find an explanation, it just fades away. It's almost like a ghost story that ends without a climax.
Yeah.
You're left with this kind of lingering sense of unease, but ultimately you move on with your life.
It's true.
Yeah.
And that's what makes, I think, this whole episode so fascinating and honestly a little unsettling.
It is.
Because, it raises some questions about, how we as a society, how we process information.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to these complex, potentially threatening issues.
Yeah, are we so used to this constant, churn of the news cycle that we've lost the ability to like pay attention.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to issues that directly impact our safety, our well-being.
That's a really good question. And it's, and it's not just about our attention spans either.
Right.
It's also about, you know, how we evaluate information, how we determine like what's credible,
Right.
what's not, especially in this world where misinformation and disinformation is just like rampant.
Yeah. It's like we're constantly playing this game of information whack-a-mole,
Totally, yeah.
trying to sort out the truth from all the noise. But the moles just keep popping up faster
Yeah.
than we can whack them.
Exactly. And that's where that's where critical thinking becomes so crucial.
Right.
We can't just sit back and passively absorb whatever information's, thrown at us. We we need to question those narratives.
Yeah.
Consider the sources, look for evidence.
We have to become like our own personal fact checkers.
We do. We absolutely do. And that takes effort. It means being willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Right.
Our biases. It means being skeptical of sensational headlines.
Right.
Easy answers. It means being open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
It is.
Especially when we're already, overwhelmed with so much information all the time.
It is. But it's also, it's incredibly important
Yeah.
because, this drone hysteria, it shows us, I think, what can happen when we let fear and speculation just run wild.
Yeah. It can lead to a lot of wasted time,
Yeah.
a lot of wasted energy, resources.
Absolutely. And it can have, real world consequences.
You're talking about the lasting impact this whole thing had on the drone industry.
Yeah, exactly. Because while the hysteria may be over, it's left a mark. We've seen like a real increase in people calling the police on legitimate drone operators.
Yeah.
Think about that. People are so like spooked by this, this phantom drone threat that they're calling the cops on anyone who's flying a drone, even if they're doing so, legally and responsibly.
Right. And it's not just like overzealous neighbors or anything.
Right.
There are the TFRs, the temporary flight restrictions that were put in place, around critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
All in response to this perceived threat.
Exactly. And these measures, they might have been, well-intentioned, but they really demonstrate like how quickly these unfounded fears can lead to, to actual restrictions, limitations in the real world.
So in a way, like the ghost of the drone hysteria is kind of still with us.
Yeah.
Right? It's still shaping policy. It's still shaping perceptions.
Right.
Even though that initial panic has subsided.
Yeah. It's quite a cautionary tale.
It is. So what can we do about it? What can we learn from all this?
Well, I think for starters, we can try to be more aware of, how these information cycles work.
Right.
Recognize that the media, especially in the age of social media, they thrive on sensationalism.
So the next time you see a story that just seems, too good to be true or too scary to ignore,
right,
take a step back.
Exactly. Just take a breath and ask yourself, okay, what's the evidence here?
Right.
Who's pushing this narrative?
Yeah.
And what are their motives?
Yeah. Don't just accept, blindly accept the information that's being fed to you. Be critical. Be skeptical.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to seek out, multiple perspectives.
Right.
Look beyond the headlines. Try and understand the nuances of the issue.
Because the truth is, more often than not, it's messy, it's complicated, it rarely fits into, that neat little box of a 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah. It's also important to remember that we all have biases.
Yeah.
We all do. We tend to, we gravitate toward information that confirms our existing beliefs, and we're very quick to dismiss anything that challenges those beliefs.
Yeah, it's human nature.
It is.
But it can also be pretty dangerous. Especially when it comes to issues like the drone hysteria.
Right, because when we're not willing to challenge those biases, we become more susceptible to manipulation.
Right.
We're more like to believe, what we want to believe, even if there's really no evidence to support it.
So how do we break out of these, echo chambers and actually engage in more, I don't know, in more productive conversations?
Well, I think it starts with being more mindful of our own biases.
Right.
You know, recognize that you have them. Everyone does, and try to be open to perspectives that differ from your own.
It's about being willing to listen, being
Hmm.
willing to learn, being willing to change your mind when you're presented with, new evidence.
Exactly. And it's also about having the courage to challenge those around you when they're spreading misinformation,
Yeah.
even if even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, the most important conversations are the ones that make us feel a little uneasy,
Right.
a little bit uncomfortable.
It's funny thinking back on this whole drone saga.
Yeah.
The thing that really strikes me is how quickly it shifted. It went from being a story about, these mysterious drones to being a story about misinformation and the media.
Right.
It became less about, what was actually happening in the skies over New Jersey,
Hmm.
and more about how that story was being told, who was telling it, and
Yeah.
why.
Yeah, and that's a really important shift, I think, because
Yeah.
it really highlights, the power of narrative. The
Right.
way a story is framed, it can have a huge impact on how we perceive it,
Right.
how we react to it, and what we ultimately remember about it.
So in a way, I mean, the drone hysteria kind of became this cautionary tale,
Yeah.
about the dangers of misinformation,
Yeah.
about the need for critical thinking,
Hmm.
and about the importance of just being aware of the narratives that are out there that shape our understanding of the world.
Right. And that's a lesson that we can apply to every aspect of our lives, really. Not just news stories about drones.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the drone hysteria, what's the one key takeaway you want our listener to walk away with?
I think it's this. Be an active participant in
Yeah.
the information ecosystem. Right.
Don't just passively consume whatever's being thrown at you.
Right.
Question everything.
Yeah.
Be skeptical.
Right.
Think for yourself,
Yeah.
and don't be afraid to change your mind.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a really fascinating exploration of how a story can take hold, how it can spread like wildfire, and then just vanish, almost without a trace.
It certainly makes you think.
It does, and that's what the deep dive is all about: encouraging you to think critically about the world around you and to never stop questioning those narratives that shape our understanding of it. So until next time.
Until next time.